Hello again, everyone. Today we're going to assemble one of these pass-through devices. There's no batteries in here. It's meant to connect to a power supply. The chip inside here is the OKR-T30. It's a 30 amp, 180 watt, up to 30 amp, 180 watt. The previous pass-through device I had made, this is a Raptor chip in this one, 120 watts. The cable is permanently attached to it, and I wanted to be able to detach the cable. So what I did this time, I used, these are called aviation connectors. They're a locking connector. So it fits in, it only goes in one way, there's a groove, and then this screws in and locks her in place here. So stick around and we're going to build one of these. I've got the enclosure all prepped. I did my drilling and cutouts, went with a black textured powder coat. Probably my favorite of the powders that I have. First thing we'll do is get the components that need to be epoxied in, the voltmeter and the trim resistor. We'll get some epoxy on there, and while that's drying, then we'll work on the board. There's a little bit of prep to do on the trim resistor though, and I'll do that now before getting that in there. So there's 3 legs on the resistor. There's one that's on the bottom, that's the wiper, and then there's one on each side, on the 0 side and on the 100 side. We want to jumper the, we'll cut them all short, but we want to jumper the one that's on the 0 side, this side, which is now on this side, over to the wiper, or the wiper over that one, doesn't matter. So I'm going to bend the wiper down to kind of intersect the pin that's on the 0 side. And I'll throw a bit of flux on that intersection. It's too much. And I'll just come tack that right there. Then I'll snip all the excess. The other leg about the same height. Just like that. Also, while I'm here, I'll just tin that single leg. It'll be easier when we get to soldering to it. Okay. The voltmeter, I'm kind of a left-hand vapor, so the decimal points on here indicate which side the display reads. So I'm thinking I'll be reading it this way, so I'm gonna throw those down that direction. Should be good. The trim resistor, get my 50 perpendicular to the looks about right. Gonna hold that in place with, and as I put the tape on, I'll push it down flush. Just don't want that to spin either way, and so that's held in there like that. Mix up some epoxy. And then around all those edges. Try and get on the underside of that trim resistor. And around the voltmeter. And there's one more thing. I 3D printed just like a little plastic tray here so that the board isn't sitting right onto the metal. So while I'm here, let's get that in there as well. And we'll hot glue the board down onto this thing, and the hot glue onto the thermoplastic will give us a nice bond. Maybe it'll not quite halfway, a little closer to the top. Right there, put that aside, let the epoxy cure, and we'll start working on the board. Okay, a few prep things we'll do onto the board here, and this is one that I had mocked up and then removed all the components, so you might see a little bit of solder on the pins there. So the two pins that are kind of on their own on this side is where our 12 volt input is going to come in. So I'm going to bend these toward each other. And we'll come paint some solder on there to make them one. The three farthest away is our positive output, which will go to the 510 positive. And I imagine I assume there's multiple pins because this little board can handle some high powers. Maybe a single pins wouldn't be enough. So here too, I'm squeezing the number 1 and 3 towards the center one, and we'll paint some solder on there and make that one big pin. Next 2 over is the ground. Same deal. Let's get these together. And these are tin, but you would want to throw a bit of flux on there and load up the iron. So these first 3. The next 2. And the last 2. First component we'll solder onto here are those 2 capacitors. We're going to make a little cap sandwich. These are filter caps. You could get away with not using them. On the OKR T10, I never used them. Seemed fine, but the datasheet does recommend filtering the input with some capacitors, so that's the purpose these serve. And I'm gonna get some the 24 gauge. A short run of, and I'm going to bear these the length of two of them, so a little longer there. Let's tin those. So before we solder the wires onto here, we want to fuse these together. So you want to hold them somehow straight, and best way I've found to do that is with your hand, but it's going to get hot very fast. So I got a bit of flux on there, and you'll take a second, you'll see paint across the top. Got some solder on the iron. We'll hit that again in a sec, but at least they're held together. And now that they won't move, I can do the other side. Bang across the top. I'll touch up the other side real quick. Okay. And we'll connect a wire to each side. And I want one wire heading this way and the other one heading the other way. These aren't polarized, so it doesn't matter which wire you use on which side. Just like that. And I'm going to encase that in a little piece of heat shrink. There we are, cap sandwich. And this jumper's between the 12 volt input. So one is going to come onto these first two pins here, and the ground. To not have this dangling or to find a position for this, here's what I've been doing. I'll throw a tiny drop of CA glue on the heat sink there. And if that comes loose or falls off after the fact, that's fine. It's just to hold it there while we work on it. Another little bit of gluing will do to hold component in place. The pull up or pull down resistor, which goes across the ground, and the pin right beside it, which is going to our switch. This too, where do we put the damn thing? What I've been doing, again, I'm gonna go drop a CA glue on the back here just to hold it in place, and then we'll bend our leads and connect. So drop there. Make sure the ceramic part is what's, if anything, touches the solder points or anything conductive on the board, and not the leads. We'll give that a sec. I think I'm using a 1K resistor here, but any multiple values would be fine. 15K would work. 4.7K like we used on the OKR T10. So you still need to hold that resistor down because I just kind of broke it loose from its glue. So first lead, come around onto the ground pins. Just going to tack that into place. And the other side then onto the pin right beside it. You would flux and tin, but I've already got solder on here, so trim off the excess. Clean up. Okay, so our 1K-ish resistor is going from the two pins that are ground to the one beside it, depending which way you're looking at it. That's going to our switch leader. Next we'll do that cap sandwich. So the ground side is going to come right onto these ground pins here. You bare some of that. Tin. And then bend. Line it right up to those ground pins. Tack that on there. Make sure your resistor leg doesn't come loose as you do that. Looks fine. The positive, I'm going to give myself a little bend, come tack in underneath these first two pins for a 12 volt input. So next pin over, we got our ground on the pin for the switch. Let's get that one done. The next one after that is the zero side of our trim resistor. I'm going to go black wire. Looks good. After that, the other side of the trim resistor, they're not polarized, but just to tell them apart, I'll go with the red. That looks good. Next three aren't used. Let's get our ground on here. So I'm going with the much heavier 16 gauge. I'm going to go underneath with that one. So on to that ground pin there. And I'm going to trim that so I only have the width of those two pins that are now together. That'll do. And the positive, which is going to be coming off of that cable from the power supply, will go on top of these three pins. Sorry, the output to the 510 is here, the input's there. So we'll go on top of these pins with the input. The output we can do now then. Just like that. And we'll protect these three. Not that it needs it. There's plenty of space between those pins, but it'll look nice. We get some 2mm heat shrink. Hit the black one first. Then our two reds. That looks really nice. If you're concerned about it, it'd be hard to get some heat shrink on the positive here. But I've been using this stuff called liquid tape. So you could cover the positive here with the liquid tape, but this is a stationary thing. It's not going anywhere. There'll be nothing flopping around that can come hit it. I claim that's fine. Last one, almost forgot, that other side of the switch, which connects to the positive input here. I'll rest it right against the other one. It's coming off our cap sandwich. So the one we just did and the one closest to the ground, these are going to our switch, our fire button. These two are going to the trim resistor. Positive 510. All are common ground, so there'll be a wire coming off the 510, coming out of the negative 510, sorry, coming out of the ground, coming out of the power cable. Will all connect together onto the common ground here. That's it for now on the board. Let's see how our enclosures and the epoxy's doing. Enclosure's looking good. One thing we'll do before putting everything in there, the connector I plan to use on the mod here is in the aviation connector. On the previous ones, I've always just used a grommet, like a rubber ring, and have the wire just going through that and hardwired inside, but then it's stuck this way, and I've kind of always wanted to be able to disconnect the wire from the mod, and that's why this time I'm going with the this connector here. They make a 2-pin like this, but I don't think 2 pins is enough to handle the amperage, so I went with the 4-pin. So I'll mount like this. If you use these on the inside, the connector only goes in one way. There's a bump here, and the pins are labeled. See there, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'll use 1, 2 for the positive and 3, 4 for the negative, and I'll just repeat that on the male side of this connector. And it's a locking connector, so there's a nut on the inside that'll hold that in place, and the male part has like a free turning bit on it that screws in and then locks into the female part of the connector here. So because there's 4 pins, I could use a 16 and maybe jumper across the 2, but then I'd have a weird like right angle there. I'll use 4 pieces of 18 gauge, 2 blacks, 2 red, 1 in each pin. So let's get that ready. Tin those. I'll also try and tin these pins here. So I said 1, 2 for the reds. Those are some really nice looking connections. I'll even, you don't need to because they're not moving, but I'll heat shrink them so they look pretty. That looks great. Now to get the board in here. Okay. So the board's going to rest like this, but it's not flat. So what I'll do is on the top here, I'll drop a blob of hot glue here, only to give it padding in between here. So that'll kind of give us a flat bottom. And once that semi-sets, then I'll come around the sides to get some hot glue in between the board and the plastic, and to overlap on top of the board to hold it down onto that piece of plastic there. So blob here. Let that kind of semi-harden. Hold that there with my thumb while that grabs hold. And I'll drop some against the board and the bottom on each side. So that'll hold our board in place. The 2 wires going to the trim resistor. In fact, let me get these out of the way for now. On the unbridged side, so the pin that's the 100% side, the pin that's closest to us, there needs to be a 20 ohm resistor between that and the red wire. And I'll solder the resistor right onto the pin, but let me get that black wire first. Pin, which goes onto the jumpered side, so the just rest that onto those. I'm going to bend one side of the resistor. See why in a sec. I'm going to tack the straight side, that resistor on there. Heat shrink the whole thing. I'll just tack that leg onto the other side, the 100% side of the trim resistor. That's good. This, while you're here, which is the pin to the right of the ground, is one for our switch. Let's get that out of the way. This one here, no, that's voltmeter. This one here is the one we ran under the input pin. That's the other side of the switch. Right there. These two remaining thin ones are the voltmeter. And we want these on the output. Oh wait, before we go any further, let me get the 510 connector wired up. So distance-wise, I'm gonna probably have to allow for a bend here. Say about there. Bit of flux in the hole. I probably won't see that because of the angle. Oops, I left the little gasket ring on there. Probably be fine. Need to solder the negative side of that. negative ring. Been using some thread lock on the 510s past little while. A little bit. Okay, that voltmeter for the output, I'm going to come and tack onto the output here. The ground, I could come tack it on here. Or I can just include it into my common. Let's do the red one first and we'll figure it out. Yeah, I'll do the same with the black. I'll tack it onto the board, the ground that's on the board. Good. I'm a little stressed about the positives coming out here, because they both need to go onto that pin, and in fact I shouldn't be. Shouldn't be stressed, I mean. There's like a compression ring, then our nut. I'm going to try and keep my two reds on that side. No, there too, try and get a bit of the thread lock. Okay, that input. We tuck these right out of the way. I'm going to try and go as straight as I can on this run. And I was tempted to go long, twist them together, solder that, and then tack it, but the heat, when I would tack it, would unravel. So I'll just tin them separate, tack them on there one at a time. Okay, now for the grounds. So what I do is I take all my grounds, try and get a natural bend in them, and cut them all the same length. Aim for around here. We're going to lose some length when we twist these together, but okay, bear these all pretty long, because we're going to twist them all together and solder that pile. and twist. Now we're going to solder that mess together. Be generous with your flux. It's going to take a lot to get the solder to should have thought of this first, but we want to apply a lot of heat to that wire, and we're right close to the spot, so that'll get hot. I have to do several applications. I think that's good. And now for some heat shrink. So I'm going to do a first piece to seal the tip there. I'm going to do another piece on top of that. To lock that down. All right, that can tuck away down here. Last thing then is our switch. Going with a plain black. I'm going to tin the switch side. I'll solder those wires with the switch in place. The camera cut out, sorry about that, but I have the switch wired. So this should be done. Close up the lid. The nice matching screws. Next thing we'll work on then is that cable that'll attach this to the power supply. So I have 4 lengths, 2 red, 2 black of 18 gauge wire, a little over 3 feet, a meter. Then I've got 3 feet of the expandable nylon sleeve here. To make it easier to fish this through the sleeve, here's what I do. Bare like a fair amount of wire from one end of all of these. And then we'll twist all of those together. We'll tin that, and then we can cut it once we've got it through. Okay, so you start at one end. Know what this jagged edge is screwing with us. Okay. And a little trick here is grab the bundle, then with this other hand push and grab the tip and then pull down. So holding it here, push, grab the tip, pull down. And just, I don't know if you repeat that. Try and keep your wires organized, because if they bunch up inside here, it's next to impossible to fix it. And there we have it. Another thing we'll do to protect the, or to prevent this from unraveling as we're working with it. I've used heat shrink to do this, but nothing holds better than the electrical tape. All right. We'll do the aviation connector side first. I'm gonna redo this tape here. So there's 4 pins on here. They're numbered to match how they were numbered on the female side of this. Let me clean up these tips here. Well, another thing I want to do is I want to keep this as short as possible. I'd like for this body to cover the tape. So I'm just going to leave what I think is enough to strip tin and come attached to the, so 1/2 inch. Get these tinned. Get these tabs tinned. So 1 and 2 were the two reds. Surprisingly hard to hold. I'll give it a small piece of tape around here just to make sure nothing touches against that housing. Okay. There's a tiny set screw that I had temporarily put in there to not lose it. Then we'll tighten down this that grabs onto the wire and sleeve. And that looks great. No tape sticking out here. Nice clean job there. Okay, the other side of this is getting the speak on. We could use an aviation connector if that's what I'd have on the power supply side. I might offer both options at one point, but we'll do the speak on for the side that connects to the power supply. I'll need to, so here too, I want enough to reach these pins here, but not so much that, you know, this ends like here and I've got wire visible. So I'm going to go as short as I can. And I'll do these one at a time. And even though these are screw terminals, I'm tinning here because if not, the screw would just crush the and move the strands out of the way. So by tinning them, we're almost making like a solid core wire, at least for that bit. This first, then this. Can't see the markings with the screw backed out. So this one's a minus. In fact, the two minuses are on the outside, the two pluses are on the in the middle. So that's that. Speak on one side, goes to the power supply. Aviation connector onto the mod side. And a nice flexible nylon sleeve. So let's give this thing a try. That works nice. So an OKR T30. It's a 30 amp, 180 watt capable board in a Hammond 1590A. Got the aviation connector, so we can remove detach the cable from the mod. Nice little pass-through device. Thanks for watching, everyone. We'll see you next time.